Let's talk to Mathew Hulbert. He's a Liberal Democrat activist and is on the other side of this debate. Mathew, you're very welcome to Talk TV this morning. How are you?
I'm good, Peter. How are you?
Very well, thank you. What did you make of what Nick Fletcher said there, Mathew?
So, I mean, there's no doubt at all, Peter, that there are a number of issues which need to be addressed to help men. I'm a man. I obviously appreciate this as much as anyone else, including, of course, as Nick Fletcher rightly mentions, the dreadful, the shocking number of men, especially men under 50, taking their own lives. The question is whether having a middling minister in government would make a difference to that, and that's what I'm.
Is it going to do any harm, Mathew?
Well, I think it could actually do some harm. I mean, I fear that such a post actually, Nick Fletcher may be honourable, but I'm not sure all members of this government are. And I fear that such a post could be used as another weapon in the culture war, which we have to admit is going on. You know, Tories have briefed that they're going to ramp up the culture wars ahead of the general election. And I just fear that this is going to be used as another stick to beat people with in that culture war.
But you have, of course, a Minister for Women, you have a Secretary of State in Cammy Badenoch. Now, she runs the Business and Trade department, but she's also the Minister for Women and Equalities. You've got a whole Government Equalities Office, and I'm not saying that men aren't involved in that. Of course, men should have equality as well as women. It's not just a one-way street. But certainly there are, as Nick pointed out, a number of very specific male issues. He talked, as you did too, Mathew, about things like suicide, like prostate cancer, boys, not having enough male teachers, for example. There are specific men's health and men's welfare issues that maybe a minister might not be a bad idea.
Well, I mean, what I'd say is that, the reason there's a Minister for Women is because there's been societal and structural things in place that have prevented women from reaching positions of power and being treated equally, and that's going back centuries. And so, that is why it's important to have a Minister for Women. Men haven't faced those kind of structural and societal problems and barriers, and even today, our Parliament is overwhelmingly full of men. More men than women, significantly.
So maybe they're having their say. Maybe this is something that is already there that we don't need to worry about. But I mean, it's interesting because you do have lots of government ministers for lots of different things, all different departments. I mean, we have ministers for levelling up, we've ministers for growth, we've ministers for all sorts of things at the more sort of junior level as well. So maybe a minister for men, maybe even with another portfolio, wouldn't be necessarily so much of a strain on the government. It would just be sort of an extra thing for them to focus on.
I mean, I think for me, actually, it's that I don't trust this specific government.
Yeah, well, you're a Lib Dem, so maybe that's part of it. But I mean, let's say, for the sake of argument, Mathew, that there was a Labour and Liberal Democrat coalition after the next government, which is not outside the realms of possibility. Then, would you be happy if there was a Minister for Men, if it was a Liberal Democrat, for example?
I'd certainly be more willing to give it a sounding then, as I don't think it would be used as a kind of culture war weapon. And I just fear that those culture wars are going to be ramped up in the run-up to the general election. And I think it's LGBT plus people like myself, actually, who will often be the targets of that culture war. And so actually I'd like to see a specific minister for LGBT plus people, and we don't have that.
Well, I mean, there is a minister for equalities, but Mathew, what is it you feel that gay people are discriminated against as a result of what this government has done? You're a gay man. What do you feel that how is this government discriminating against gay men per se?
Well, gay men are often at the top of the tree, actually. We often do better than other members of the LGBT plus community who suffer far more than us, and especially trans people who really have been the target of this culture war from this government. But I think
perhaps they shouldn't be a minister for gay men because they're doing okay.
Well, I wouldn't have a specific minister for gay men. I'd have a minister for LGBT plus people in the equalities.
I mean, there is an equalities minister, so that is covered.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's my whole point: is that there isn't a separate minister for LGBT plus people. And so, in a sense, you're making your own argument that why should there be a specific minister for men when actually...
Well, I mean, in fairness, there are a lot more men than there are LGBT people in this country.
Yeah, and we've had, and men, and again, I am one, so I include myself in that, but we've had it our own way perhaps for too long, and that is why there's a minister for women and should be ministers for minority groups. I mean, the question is, should there be a specific minister for men? Now, as I say, I accept that there are a number of issues, promoting positive rather than toxic masculinity, male health generally, boys' underachievement in education. The question is whether a middling minister in government will make any difference to that, or whether actually it's just something for the Tories to wave around ahead of the next election.
Shall I read out a couple of messages? Not entirely complimentary to you, Matthew. You happy enough for that? That Lib Dem is a typical middle-class wet who's afraid to rock the fluffy boat of bias against straight men, says Mick.
Very, very, very working class. My dad drove a taxi and my mum worked in a factory. I'm very proud to be working class.
OK, Ian in York says, I think the crisis amongst men could be seen coming for a while, the emasculation of men through advertising, when that particular industry feels that it is moving on the right side of history. All the ads showing men to be inept, figures of fun and ridicule, always bested by women, young boys growing up with these images. Men are lost as a section of society, being confused about our rules now, says Ian in York. What would you say to him, Matthew?
I don't deny that. And, I have a nephew who's turning 16 tomorrow, bless him, so happy birthday, Tory.
Happy birthday to him.
But tomorrow is a great lad. And of course, I'm not denying that there are issues for men and boys. I'm questioning whether that is going to be solved by a middling minister in government, and especially this government, with its obsession with culture war issues. That's the point that I'm trying to make this morning. OK, stay where you are for a second, Matthew. We've got another Matthew in Cheshire, who's given me a call on 0344 499 1000. Matthew in Cheshire, you're very welcome to the programme. What point would you like to make?
Good morning, Peter and Matthew. It's a good idea, but Parliament's incapable of dealing with the issues throughout Britain as it is without having an extra caseload and it would also depend who that minister was.
But surely, Matthew, a lot of those issues are maybe issues, for example, affecting men specifically could be focused on by this, and that could help a lot of other parts of government, lots of other government departments. We've talked today about education, we talked about health, we talked about suicide, we talked about all sorts of things. Maybe that would help actually other bits of government as well, Matthew.
A lot of the problems that mainly British men encounter are as a result of more or less being erased from society by the media.
Do you feel erased from society as a British man?
I don't know, but you just have to look at television. I'm a proud British man, and nobody will ever take that away from me. But if you just have to look at television and the media, white British men especially are more or less a stain on British society, the way they were treated. And a lot of the mental health issues that come as a result of that are probably because of the media. People feel a lack of a role in society.
Do you not see yourself represented on? I mean, there are lots of men actors and so on TV. There are lots of. I mean, I'm sitting here as a man presenting a program. I mean, you see a lot of men on the media. But do you feel that maybe it's advertising? I mean, what aspects of the media do you feel that men are not represented properly?
Well, we look at advertising, we look at the BBC, we look at ITV. It's all down to, I think, diversity and inclusion more or less means erasing white British men in Britain, and people seem to forget that might have a harmful effect on the mental health of British men and their role in British society.
Maybe it's time that actually women and ethnic minorities were given a bit of a chance to put themselves forward and have more of a role. Do you not think, Matthew? Maybe proud British men, and there are many of them, and I'm one of them. Maybe we've had our time. Maybe it's time to get out of the way for other people.
I don't dispute that for a minute, Peter. But I would also say that people should be there on merit. We should have a meritocracy. Real feminists don't stand on men to climb up themselves. They take men with them.
OK, Matthew, some good thoughts there. Very, very interesting. Mathew Hulbert, another Matthew. What do you make of what Matthew in Cheshire told us a second ago?
So, I mean, I think we heard there what I fear could happen if there was a Minister for Men, was that it became an attack on diversity and inclusion, didn't it? We've just heard it. in that call.
I don't think he was attacking diversity and inclusion. He was saying real feminists bring men with them. That was what he said at the very end of what he was saying, and he said that there's no problem. Matthew in Cheshire has no problem with the fact that people get their chance, but he's just saying that he feels that there are some roles, British men in his estimation, that aren't being given their place.
Well, and he attacked diversity and inclusion before that. So, I mean, we all heard that in the call. I mean, interestingly, I ran a poll. I mean, I know this isn't scientific, Peter, but I ran a poll on my Twitter. I still call it Twitter. I'm not going to call it that other thing. Yesterday on this, because I was genuinely interested in what people had to say. And my poll came up 60% no, there shouldn't be this minister, 22% yes, and 18% don't know. And as someone said in the comments, and it bears repeating, men haven't been the ones being systematically oppressed for generations. We just have. That's just the fact of the matter. Now, are there issues that we've listed this morning that need to be looked at and maybe looked at across government? Yes, there are, and maybe under a future Labour Lib Dem government, such a minister could be worthwhile. But I just don't trust this government to not make it a stick to beat people with.
Okay, Mathew Hulbert, thank you very much indeed, Lib Dem activist. Very much appreciate your thoughts there. We'll get more of your thoughts